As we approach the college football season, there are a few quarterbacks who come to mind who I think need to improve their play in 2024. All of this is for various reasons, as some of the quarterbacks have been disappointing compared to their recruiting ranking, some of them have not put up great stats compared to the school they're at, and others have just flat out not been good at all. In today's video, I'm going to talk about 8 quarterbacks who I think need to improve in 2024, how they've done so far, and what I think they could do this upcoming season. But before we get started, if you're a big fan of college football, be sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a like if you want to support today's video, and let me know what player, team, topic, or situation I can cover next. Now let's get started and talk about 8 quarterbacks who need to improve. Okay, so this list is actually not in any particular order, and the first guy I want to talk about is Tyler Van Dyke. We've been hearing about Van Dyke for quite some time, as at one point he was the next great quarterback out of the East Coast, as he went to a high school in Connecticut and became the number 7 pro-style quarterback in the class of 2020. He arrived at Miami with a decent amount of hype, and then ended up taking over in the back half of 2021, throwing for nearly 3,000 yards with 25 touchdowns and 6 picks. Going into 2022, Van Dyke was seen as a potential top 10 pick and a Heisman contender, but he ended up getting benched and played really bad. This past season he did improve, throwing for 19 touchdowns and 2,700 yards, but eventually Miami decided to move on from him and get Cameron Ward, and he will now head over to Wisconsin. Wisconsin will have their offensive coordinator Phil Longo and head coach Luke Fickell, and you'll be looking to do a much better job than Tanner Mordecai did last year. Wisconsin is not known for quarterback development. Van Dyke really needs to elevate his play if he wants to get back into the NFL conversation, or if he doesn't want to go down as a bust. I really have no idea what to expect from Van Dyke at Wisconsin this fall, but he definitely needs to improve, and he has all the potential and talent to be a big deal. Up next, we have a 2019 kid who's on his last year of eligibility, and that is Grayson McCall. After going to Porter Ridge High School in Indian Trail, North Carolina, he became a 2-star recruit and a top 3,000 player in the class of 2019, and would decide to join Jamie Chadwell at Coastal Carolina. He ended up blossoming in 2020, leading the Chanticleers to national relevance, and putting up decent stats with 2,400 yards and 26 touchdowns. Coastal had a ton of hype in 2021, and he delivered with his best season yet, with nearly 3,000 yards, 27 touchdowns, and 3 picks, and after doing well again in 2022, he fell off in 2023. He only threw for 1,900 yards with 10 touchdowns and 6 picks, before he went down with a gruesome season-ending injury. Maybe McCall hasn't been that disappointing, but he's transferring to NC State, and expectations are really going to get real now. He's at a Power 5 school who's loading up for a potential ACC championship run. We've been hearing about his name for 4 years now, and will he finally live up to the hype and become a national name again, or will he go down as a bust who everyone forgot about? McCall needs to elevate his play, and went from a guy who's an NFL prospect to now not even being talked about much anymore. We'll just have to wait and see. Now we get to talk about another player who has not lived up to his recruiting ranking coming out of high school. At one point, it looked like Hudson Card was the next big thing. He ended up going to Lake Travis High School, and at one point was listed as a 5-star recruit. He ended up falling all the way to the 4th best dual-threat quarterback in the class of 2020, and would eventually arrive at Texas. While he ended up redshirting his first year, he would then battle it out with Casey Thompson in 2021 for the starting job. In total, he threw for 5 touchdowns and 1 pick, and then once again lost the starting job in 2022 to Quinn Ewers. He threw for 900 yards and 6 touchdowns before he would transfer across the country to Purdue to take over for Aiden O'Connell. This past year at the Boilermakers, the team only won 3 games, and he threw for 2,300 yards with 15 touchdowns and 8 interceptions. Carr did not live up to the hype last year, didn't win many games, and a lot of times looked like he had no idea what he was doing. While Card is obviously a decent starter, he was the next big thing coming out of high school, and he really has one more year at Purdue to show it before he could get replaced and eventually labeled as a bust. He'll have to fight off their big-time recruit Marcos Davila, and many are wondering if Card can put it all together and finally win some games. I feel like people may give me flack for having Cameron Rising on the list, but in my opinion, he really does need to step up after everything that has gone on over the last few years. Coming out of Ventura, California, Cameron Rising was a 4-star recruit who originally committed to play for Oklahoma. After eventually flipping to Texas, he never got a chance to get on the field for the Longhorns, so he would decide to transfer ahead of the 2020 season. Nothing would end up happening then either, and then eventually he would take over in 2021. He threw for 2,400 yards with 20 touchdowns and 5 picks, while also leading the Utes to back-to-back Rose Bowls after another strong 2022 season, in which he threw for 3,000 yards and 26 scores. He also was a threat on the ground, but he got hurt, and that's when the whole saga started. He was questionable for their Week 1 game against Florida, and then all of a sudden just didn't play the whole year. I'm not quite sure what actually went on there, as if he was actually hurt, they would have just ruled him out for the season, so I don't know why he was questionable or debating playing in week 1. It never made any sense to me, but Rising got a 7th year of eligibility, and now will be back in college football again. While Rising has been hurt, this will now be his 7th year, and he really needs to put it all together. He's been considered one of the best quarterbacks in college football, but I actually want to see it again, and we'll see how he does after the injury, and with Utah being the favorite to win the Big 12. Maybe it's controversial to have him on this list, but I have not been as impressed with Rising as everybody else. In my eyes, there might not be a quarterback who had a bigger fall off than KJ Jefferson. After becoming a 4-star recruit coming out of the state of Mississippi, KJ Jefferson would back up Felipe Franks in 2020 before he would eventually take over as a starter in 2021. Under Sam Pittman, he would absolutely go off, throwing for 2,600 yards and 21 touchdowns, while also rushing for 6 scores and nearly 700 yards on the ground. He helped elevate Arkansas football back to relevance and could have gone off to the NFL, honestly. He would have been a late pick, but instead came back for the 2022 season and did once again have a good year. He threw for 2,600 yards and had a combined 33 touchdowns. Sadly, Arkansas football would fall off though, and in 2023, instead of going off to the NFL, he came back again, and this is where things went sour. He only threw for 2,100 yards, Arkansas lost a ton of games, he lost that it factor, entered the transfer portal, got arrested, and is now going to UCF. While UCF is obviously a Power 5 school, it feels like a little bit of a step down, and it feels like KJ Jefferson is trying to get back to relevancy. He could have declared after either the 2021 or 2022 season and probably gone to the NFL, but instead he's now scrapping and clawing and sort of just hanging around college football. It's time for him to put it all together at UCF and elevate that program, or he'll end up being one of those guys that people just remember off the top of their head when they think about how Arkansas was really good in 2021. We'll just have to wait and see though. Another guy who's going to be under a ton of pressure this upcoming fall is DJ Uiagalelei. After being a 5-star recruit in the class of 2020, DJ blew up in one of his first starts against Notre Dame, showing that he was the future of Clemson football. Unfortunately, after he took over as a starter in both 2021 and 2022, he was sort of run out of town, Cade Klubnik was thrown in the spot, and many blamed DJ for Clemson's struggles. He ended up going to Oregon State, and this past year, he threw for 2,600 yards, 21 touchdowns, and 7 picks. Those are definitely respectable numbers, and I'm not trying to hate on DJ at all. I actually really like him. He's transferring over to Florida State this upcoming fall, and I think he's going to have to elevate his play. He is now at one of the most premier brands in college football who's thirsting for a college football playoff appearance. He was a 5-star recruit coming out of high school and has been considered the next big thing for quite some time. Will he elevate his play and become a top 5 quarterback in the country, or will he flounder under the pressure and just be average? So far, he was just average at Clemson and above average at Oregon State, and we'll see if he can take that next gear and take that next level. We'll just have to wait and see though. Okay, now we get to the last 2 quarterbacks on the list, and these guys in my mind are well above all the other 6 guys on the list, and they really need to step up. The first one is Cade Klubnik. Coming out of Westlake High School in Texas, Cade was just your average 4-star quarterback before he had a meteoric rise, arguably becoming the number 1 quarterback in the class of 2022. Clemson fans were super hyped for him, and at the end of 2022, he got a chance to start in their bowl game. He showed some potential, but many were worried that he was in over his head. He ended up becoming the starter in 2023 and threw for 2,800 yards with 19 touchdowns and 9 interceptions. The problem is, Clemson did not live up to their hype. Cade struggled with turnovers and just looked a little bit behind. Again, it was only his first year as a starter, but he was a 5-star, and it looked like he had all the tools to become a big deal. Now as we head into 2024, Cade Klubnik has his 5-star status, is playing for a Clemson fan base that's starving for a playoff appearance, and he needs to elevate his play if he wants to be an NFL draft pick and live up to all the hype he's had. In my opinion, he needs to step up big, but no one needs to have a bigger 2024 season than Drew Allar. Allar was a fellow classmate of Cade Klubnik in the 2022 recruiting cycle and ended up being ranked as the number 3 overall recruit and the number 1 quarterback. Allar would sit on the bench behind Sean Clifford in 2022, getting in garbage time, throwing for 4 touchdowns. Going into 2023, some thought that Allar was the next big thing. He was a Heisman candidate, was supposed to elevate Penn State to the playoff picture, and was hopefully to help them beat teams like Michigan and Ohio State. Unfortunately, Allar was good, but not at the right moments. He ended up throwing for 2,600 yards and 25 touchdowns and 2 picks, but in the 2 biggest games of the year, he really didn't do anything. Against number 3 Ohio State, he went 18 of 42 for 191 yards and a touchdown. They ended up losing that game, and he looked absolutely terrified. In the game against Michigan, he went 10 of 22 for 1 touchdown. While he did show some marginal improvement against number 11 Ole Miss, Allar was not great in the 3 biggest games he played, and that's what he was brought in to do. He's now getting more comparisons to Christian Hackenberg, and going into 2024, it feels like Franklin's on the hot seat. It feels like Penn State absolutely needs to make the playoff, and Allar needs to live up to all that hype he had. I truly think he has the potential to be a Heisman candidate and a first-round NFL draft pick, but he's going to have to show it this upcoming season. A lot of times, Allar looked scared last year, and he's going to have to become more confident and just command that Penn State team if they want any hope of going far. So yeah, today I talked about 8 quarterbacks who in my opinion really needed to improve. Some of them needed to improve based on their recruiting cycle, some of them needed to improve because they've been around too long, and some of them need to improve because they're playing for programs that are so high profile and they have so much potential that just being really good is not going to be good enough. But what do you guys think? Who do you think is the most overrated quarterback in college football? Who's a quarterback who you think needs to improve? And what sort of list video should I do in my next one? Before you go, don't forget to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and check out all the videos on the end screen. Hope to see you guys again soon, but until next time, peace.